Carter, the Power Bryant. I thought Brian Kelly couldn't recruit.
No, he can't. He's terrible at it. I mean, just God awful.
I will tell you this. Carter. Kai Bates commits on Wednesday.
Big one.
Wardell Mack says he wants it to be done before the season. Let's see what happens with Don McKinley. Man, Carter, if they can close, this is going to be something that's going to be talked about like in serious note around the state. But I think nationally, this man just came in here and locked the state down when Ed Orgeron couldn't.
Let's get to it. Okay. Obviously, yes, you've talked about it at length. Tylen Singleton, big time pickup over the weekend. And, you finished 10 for 10. That's obviously pretty legendary. It's not been done a whole lot. And it goes to show you that these kids are buying in with what the staff is selling, right? And obviously, as you know, Blake, I like some of the Louisiana 3-stars that they have committed in this class as well. So really excited about this. And hopefully LSU, continues that tradition, top 10 recruiting classes. And if you get some of the biggest fish of them all, you could finish in the top 5. And that would obviously mean LSU is still recruiting at that national championship level, baby.
Well, you can't tell me that beating Alabama doesn't make a massive point here. Like,
yeah.
I just think, Carter, that families look at Brian Kelly as the head coach and say, well, he's not Ed. Like, we know the direction he's taken us.
Right.
And am I wrong in just saying, like, hey, it's going to be different while he's here for a while?
Yeah, and that's a good thing, right? You needed someone to rewrite where we were going with this program, and BK's done a really good job of that. Now, obviously, Blake, it's time to transition that onto the field. And look, Kai Bates, obviously a really good corner out of Florida, top 150 guy. That's someone that you definitely want to be a part of your class. We know the importance of defensive backs, and that would be wonderful. And, we all keep up with the recruiting, the Bayou splashes, all that stuff. That's very important. But players also want to see a good product on the field. And if LSU puts together a product on the field like they did last year, things are only going to get better in recruiting.
I agree. We've talked a lot of recruiting so far. Let's talk about on the field. Carter, we're 10 days away from this team reporting. What's interesting? A unit that we did talk about, but not in great depth. I said that I thought LSU and the interior defensive line was subpar the last couple of years. We kind of pushed back a little bit on that.
Yeah.
I've asked you this multiple times. You talked about DB. We've talked about running back, quarterback. When that gate opens on Wednesday, the first place that I'm going is watching the defensive line. It's specifically the interior defensive line. Carter, I know what Denver Harris is going to get me. I kind of feel like I know. I know. Maybe because I watch a lot of Southeastern football, I know what kind of player Zy Alexander is going to be. I know his weaknesses and his strengths. Are we all right in the interior defensive line? Because the last 3 times you lost, it's because you got pushed around up there. Now, you didn't have Mason Smith, but that's the position group that I'm going to. I want to see the big uglies up front on the defensive line.
Yeah, especially with a new coach in Jimmy Lindsey. That's going to be the first time. That's going to be the first time, Blake, you'll be seeing him, run the operation, right? And that'll be also one of the first times that he has, obviously, his full position group. Deshaun Womack, by all accounts, obviously you're really plugged in with him, Blake, but I hear he's ready to go 100%. Yep. So there's nothing holding him back now. I'm hearing a lot of good things about his development, and obviously it's going to come down to what Matt House wants to do with him. It's going to be a very key piece. So one thing, Blake, is technique-wise, what do they want to do with their defensive line? Do they want to try and run a little bit more tight front, where you have 2 4 eyes and a straight head up, and that's what Aranda did, and that's what Matt House did in 2018. LSU did some of that this past year, but not a whole lot. Obviously, you need the personnel. You need the dudes to run that. You got to have some guys that can really hold their ground, and that didn't really fit LSU's total room, especially after Mason Smith left. So we'll see. Obviously, I think the most interesting guys will be not only Womack, but the transfers, right? What does Jordan Jefferson look like? What does Paris Shan look like? What does Jalen Lee look like? Can you get at least one of those guys to be a key rotational piece? I think one of them will emerge, hopefully two of them. And if you get a rotation going, obviously Mekhi Wingo played way too many snaps last year. I think we all agree on that. Jacqueline Roy also wore down as well. You got to have a deeper rotation up front in that defensive line. If not, you're just going to get the ball run down your throats like you did at the end of last season.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Brian Kelly talked about at SEC Media Days wanting to get Mason Smith one-on-one opportunities and maybe doing things that he gets a one-on-one opportunity. Carter, this is what he said. This isn't what I've said. He said that he thinks Mason Smith is going to win 90% of those one-on-ones. If that's the truth, okay, then I expect there to be some exotic stuff to get, like what they did with Chris Jones, okay, at Kansas City when Matt House was there. They did a lot of exotic stuff with the backers. Now, I know Steve Spagnuolo called that defense, but I think that he could learn from that when you have that big of an interior defensive lineman. I am going there. I want to see Jimmy Lindsey. I want to see Coach Jancic. How does that really form into a lot of things? I think that it will be interesting.
Yeah.
Carter, camp is one thing, and I think that we will debate and talk about what this quarterback, that quarterback, this guy is doing. Let's talk about a little bit, though, on the season. Carter, I continue to go up and down this schedule, and I look at it like I'm sitting here looking at it right now. There's not really anybody that scares me other than Florida State. Nobody on the schedule scares me more than Florida State. I look at that and say, yeah, man, maybe if you lose to Florida State, I could see you winning the next 11.
Yeah. That's definitely within the realm of possibility.
So is there any teams not named Florida State that scare you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not necessarily who you play. It's when you play them and what time you play them. Right now, like, you're a former player. I'm a former player. You played college. I didn't, but I always had the mindset where I will play anytime, any place, anywhere. And that's the mindset of most players. But the reality is it does affect your performance when you actually play teams. So, for me, I think Missouri is the weakest team SEC-wise when you look at pretty much any power ranking system. But at the same time, that's a tough spot. As you know, Blake, the back-to-back road game stat, that's going to be on the back end of playing Ole Miss, the week before. I'm not saying Mizzou is anywhere close to LSU when it comes to talent. Nobody would say that. But it is tough to go on the road and play in the SEC. It just is. Especially Mizzou plays a lot of day games. You play a day game in Columbia, Missouri, which is basically just out there. That could be a difficult game. But that's just an example of LSU is just not going to play their absolute best every week. And that's why this team, like they did last year, they're going to have to grind out some of these victories. Because for me, Blake, I don't think any of the SEC teams LSU will play next year are just bad. I wouldn't just look at any of those teams as just runovers. I'm not high on Mississippi State going into this next year. Arkansas skill guys, not a huge fan of their receivers and tight end groupings. All these teams have weaknesses that LSU will play next year. It's just tough the way that some of these games can be sequenced. And one final thing about the schedule is that Auburn game. CBS has 2 day games. They get to choose on that slate which 2 games that they want. That very well could be an 11 a.m. home game. Now look, Blake, I know the pitchforks are going to come after me after that, but that's how, it works out. So you obviously need some luck. You need a ton of injury luck. But on paper, you are correct, Blake. There very well could be a real possibility that LSU is favored in every one of their games, especially if the Florida State line stays the way that it is now. LSU will be favored in every one of their games going all the way up until the Alabama game.
Do you think that they would be a favorite if they're undefeated going into that one?
It just depends on how Alabama performs.
Both teams are undefeated.
No, Alabama would be favored.
I agree.
Yeah, because okay,
it's at home. It would be like if it was in Death Valley, it would go to LSU.
Exactly.
Carter, a team that when I look at this, I don't look at teams and when you play them as much. I look at matchups, like position group matchups. Okay. I don't know how to feel about Ole Miss offensively. I just don't. Okay. The reason being is that they're replacing some guys along that offensive line. Okay. That 3 guys in the interior. Is Jackson Dart with a reloaded defense at LSU going to be able to pick you apart? I don't know that. Yeah, Colton Junkins can run for 200 yards. That doesn't mean anything to me. The fact is, can Jackson Dart, after taking all those big hits, does he have buyer's remorse and saying, I should have never came to Ole Miss? I do look at Missouri. It's weird, but I don't think that there's any position group that they have. I think defensively as a unit, they're really damn good under Blake Baker. I look at Miss State. I look at Arkansas. We continuously have this conversation. But let me ask you this. That's a lot to be said for this. You covered the team in 2007, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So when you were covering the team in 2007, did it feel a lot like this? Like when you covered the team in 2019, did this not feel a lot of the same ways that I feel like, hey, man, there's no reason you should lose this game? None.
Now, I do want to make one clarification. I was a freshman at LSU. I didn't officially start my media career. I was just a fan, but obviously I kept up.
Okay, well, you covered 2019 at an extensive pace.
Yeah, so
when you go through both of those, how did it feel? Did it feel like this offseason?
It did, for this reason. No certain team feels exactly the same, but LSU did return a lot of guys on the 07 team. It's part of the reason why they won so many close games, Blake, because they were very experienced. 2019, LSU only had 3 draft picks the year before. That was tied for their fewest ever at LSU. So that means that they were returning a lot. And now with the transfer portal, that draft pick thing isn't as important, in my opinion, but they still didn't lose just an exodus of a ton of key guys outside of Ojulari and maybe a few others. So they do return a lot of snaps. In particular, they return a lot of snaps on that offensive line. So it does feel similar because there are so many guys coming back, and that's normally a good sign for if a team is going to be a championship contender or not, especially considering all the better teams on LSU schedule does not return so many key guys. Alabama, new quarterback, new system as well. Florida, new quarterback. Obviously, Georgia, when we play them in the SEC championship game. Speaking it into existence tonight on AYS, when you rematch them, you don't have to worry about Stetson Bennett, who carved us up. He was excellent in that game. So I think LSU is in a good spot because they do return so many key guys.
What's the best unit on LSU's team?
Right now, I would say wide receiver. There's obviously some concerns there after those top 2 guys. And then, honestly, the unit that will probably be the best is the linebacker unit. When you have Harold Perkins and Omar Speights, I think by the end of the season, it'll be clear that both of those guys are top 10 players on the team, if they're not already. Definitely Harold Perkins and probably Omar Speights. And then if you throw in the jack position, I've grown a little bit on Ovie Agufu recently. Obviously, he was on my channel, so a little bias there, but I'm just being real. I like Ovie. I like his attitude. I've gotten to know a little bit about him, and he's really hungry to, be on a competitive team. The jack linebacker, you might not have the same level of playmaker as BJ Ojulari, but you have a lot of experience there and some young guys behind him. So right now, Blake, I would give the slight edge to wide receiver because I think BTJ is about to have a big year. But then after that, I'll go linebacker.
Let's stay on that BTJ. Why do you think he's going to have a big year?
So we just did a huge breakdown on Power Hour LSU. The first thing is just positive regression. This guy's had just some of the worst luck when it comes to overturns and his foot barely being out of bounds and just very unlucky things working against him. The ball slightly being behind him. And look, he's not been perfect. There are times when he disappears, but this is what I like. He blocks well, right? That's always a key thing. That shows me he's a very unselfish guy, right? In that Alabama game, we missed him a few times where he was able to get some separation. He had 0 catches, but when we needed him, he put Elias Ricks back on our own sideline. Eli Ricks was trying to join our team again. Go look at it. Eli was just chilling.
I remember.
Yeah, and those little things really, stand out to me. But obviously, watching him, I watched every catch he's made and almost made. He had a 71-yard touchdown return versus Florida as a freshman. I'm telling you, like, unluckiest things I've ever seen. But he's got to become a bigger alpha. You are the clear-cut number 2 guy. You've got to become a little bit more of a Himothy. Have that mindset. Be that guy. Be a little bit more vocal. Say, hey, throw me the ball. I'll go up and go get it. Obviously, he's one of the best at that at LSU. So I'm really bullish on him going into next year. I think we all see the talent. We all know his background. Walker, great basketball player there. But I think this is a year that he will eclipse 500-ish yards and have a wonderful season as a number 2 to Malik.
I think they got to go more than – he's got to have more than 500. Because go ahead.
Well, on average, there's 15 to 16 to 20-ish receivers that get 500 yards. So I do think Mason is going to be a solid player. Obviously, him and, Jayden have a lot of rapport, especially after the Alabama game. And obviously, Malik is going to get fed quite a bit. So I think 500 is a good
Anderson can get fed a lot.
Right. And what's going to be very interesting, on Thursday, I'm releasing a big third down study, Blake. And one thing, LSU's offense last year was the second best in the SEC at third down.
6th in the country.
6th,
on third down offense, right?
Yeah, so it was 9th, but still, you're right there.
It went 6th?
It was 9th total in percentage, but you're right. It's in the realm, okay? They're second in the SEC. The issue, though, was there was a little bit of regression when you actually filter out for Power 5 competition. So the next big step for the LSU offense is, can they find someone that can consistently move the sticks on third down? Last year, Malik was that guy. He made a bunch of really difficult catches to move the sticks on third, and he had an early one versus Purdue on 4th when he was in the slot. So are we going to play Malik more in the slot because of that? Because Jayden and him have such a good rapport. You retweeted me earlier today when he converted a big third down versus Alabama. That was a very difficult catch, and that was one of Jayden's better throws while his head got knocked off. Is there going to be someone else? Could that be BTJ that steps up and make those difficult catches to move the chains? It's going to be tough.
Well, if he doesn't, Kyron Lacey might.
He might. He very well could.
So there's a little competition here to where if he doesn't, I don't know if Kyron Lacey doesn't start getting those targets, right? And so that's the question that's what makes LSU so interesting, because they're so deep at these positions.
Right.
I will push back on you at one thing. I'm not going to disagree with you on linebacker. I don't think that you could – I think they're – and look, we're not even talking about Greg Penn and how much of a leap that he could take. Look at DeMar from year 1 to year 2. Could Greg Penn be that guy? I think the best position group on this team is quarterback.
Okay. Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I think in terms of SEC depth, absolutely. And if that is your best position and Jayden is the first team all SEC quarterback, like people are projecting.
It's not just Jayden, though. It's not just because I know that Garrett is doing the things that he needs to do. Carter, they're just things that I'm hearing that's a little bit different about Jayden at the current moment.
Okay, so you are feeling pretty bullish on a huge jump here.
I kind of am feeling a little bullish, but that's the first time I've said that publicly.
Let's go. Let's go.
All right. With that being, because I'm so reserved in reference to, man, he did miss some wide open things last year.
Yeah.
But how difficult, Carter, I just see the progression in a guy like Nuss, and everybody's like, well, he's a fifth-year guy, and these guys don't normally take massive leaps in year 5. But it happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just feel that there's going to be differences because I think teams are going to have to stack the box. Okay. And they're going to pitch, nickel and dime teams down the field and then go for a deep shot. Like, hey, Jaden, we're getting man-to-man coverage on the outside. Throw it and see what happens. Throw it to Aaron Anderson. Because when they're doing their 7-on-7 and they're going through some drills and the safeties have to creep up because he's doing it, Carter, I know for a fact that Aaron Anderson caught a 75-yard touchdown last week.
Let's go.
And so those are the things that I'm bullish about, but I'm like, hey, man, I got to be reserved. But I do agree. If LSU wide receiver unit could cut out the drops, they will be dangerous. Carter, we led the SEC in drops. Your best friend from ACC StatCat had that stat with Kayshawn, drop percentage, whatever.
Right.
So, all right.
And one final thing. All right. Yes, there were a lot of drops, but sometimes those drops get characterized because they got two hands on it and it's not the absolute best throw. There were a couple of those.
How many of those have to happen for you to lead the SEC?
Well, quite a bit of those happen, and that's going to be the big thing, especially
Carter, the 1K Sean Booty first drive in the end zone on the jump ball, he's got to come down with that.
Yeah, versus Florida State. No, I agree.
Brian Thomas, the hitch route against Auburn, back-to-back times, it hits him in the chest. One time he goes to a knee, but Carter, it hits him in the chest.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right about that. But on one certain kind of route, which is the in breakers. So
you're talking about the slot slant.
Right. So there was one versus Tennessee early in the game that Kayshawn should still catch, but the throw could have been better. Okay.
One boinked off of Jack Besh's helmet.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. The drops do need to get better. But also there was another in-breaker versus Alabama on a 3rd and 7 in the second half that was also slightly behind Kayshawn, but it could have been a slightly better throw. Now, that's why it goes back to what we were talking about the wide receivers a minute ago. Obviously, I'm really high on Jaden going into this next season. That normally doesn't happen with Malik Neighbors. It just doesn't. Like, there was one time when Malik.
So you're telling me that it was not happening with Malik, but it was happening with a guy that we knew that was taking off plays.
Yes. And I will also.
And a timing route. That's nothing but timing.
Yes. So this is what I'll say about this is a lot of these great LSU teams, okay, these aren't always like the big highlight plays, like the deep throw to Jamar Chase. These are the slot receivers. So, like, for instance, this was a guy who was a very good player, not an all-time great, but early Doucette, really good football player. He was that slot guy for LSU that made a lot of difficult catches to move the chains. And, obviously the Alabama game in 2007 is what he's going to be known for, but he was just really good at that. He was very good at making difficult catches over the middle. Is that person Aaron Anderson? Is that person Kyron Lacey? Right? I want someone else other than Malik Neighbors to be someone that makes these very difficult grabs next season. And look, there were some that were made last year. We saw Mason Taylor get better as the season moved on, and he started making some really tough grabs when we really needed them. So overall, I do agree with you on the drops. The balls on some of those could be slightly thrown better, but at the same time, there's got to be someone that is not quite a Justin Jefferson because he's special. But the one thing Jets did a lot of on that 2019 team was making a lot of these 6, 7, 8-yard catches in really tight spaces while getting hit. We just didn't really have a ton of that last year, and a lot of championship teams had those kinds of plays.
You know what I like to? Speaking about Kyron Lacey from earlier, that dude breaks a lot. He's not easy to take down.
Yeah.
Even last year, Carter, when he got his hands on the ball, he was breaking a tackle. He was gonna. One thing that was for sure, Death Taxes and Kyron Lacey breaking a tackle a game, like in just running over a dude, like getting out of there. It's gonna be interesting to see. All right, we did have somebody say, "What about Shelton Sampson?" I don't think it's fair to ask you that question because he hasn't played yet. But I will tell you, it's going to be tough to keep him off the field, though.
So this is what's great about him is he's a true outside receiver, and those are harder to find. Okay, and if you can put him on the field, put BTJ opposite him, and let Malik cook from the slot, you're deadly. You're really, really, really deadly. Blake, I am a big believer in Malik playing a little bit more slot receiver this year. He really showed some tough catching ability versus Purdue early in the game. And I just like him there. And part of the reason why I like him there is Jayden feels comfortable throwing the football to Malik Neighbors over the middle. So if Shelton Sampson could be a true outside receiver or anyone else, Landon Ibieta, whoever it may be, Chris Hilton, I'm very high on Shelton Sampson, as you know, Blake. Also like Kyle Parker a lot, but I don't know. I think he's more of a slot guy than an outside guy. But yeah, Shelton, it's a good question, Brandon. And, we see a lot of people, suggesting some really good receivers here. But look, this is always the case. A lot of great coaches will tell you this. Targets just aren't given, especially at LSU. You got to earn these sons of guns. Like, you got to go out there and prove that you are him. And there's room for that behind Malik Neighbors. There still is. As great as and as big a fan as I am of Brian Thomas Jr., there is room. If he doesn't come in and just be that guy, you better watch out because the targets could go elsewhere, like you mentioned, Blake.
That's what makes you the GOAT, man. You're the GOAT. That was a pretty easy, breezy, lemon squeezy 30 minutes.
Let's go. Hey, I want to do this. Okay. I do it on my channel. You do this as well. I want to shout out some former Tigers. Okay. Andre Sale. Okay. Former walk-on quarterback. Yeah. I think you remember him.
Yeah. Arena League, right?
Yeah. So he's playing indoor league. He actually sent me this shirt today. And the reason why I wore it on your channel is because this kind of matches the AYS.
Ah, yeah.
So I wanted to show Sale some love. He was a walk-on backup 4th string to Joe Burrow in 2018. So I want to show him some love, man. Proud of him because it's hard. Blake, right? When you're playing these indoor leagues, you got to still be locked in, right? And he worked his tail off to get with the Tulsa team, and he played really well. So shout out to him.
Whether you're Curtis Taylor winning the national title, whether you're Jerry Stovall being
look at you,
the GOAT, whether you are Michael Clayton, okay, changing the wide receiver game at LSU, whether you're Brandon Taylor, the best number 18 in the history of LSU. Name another.
The best?
Name another.
The best?
Name if it's not Brandon, who is it?
I know that your guy. I will. No. Here's what
I thought.
No. Here's what I'll say. There are better ones, but Brandon was so nice to me when I was at LSU. He always gave. When I was a student reporter, he always gave me an interview. Right, and every time I see him, I dap him up, tell him how much I appreciate.
Brandon Taylor is the best number 18 in LSU history.
But
I am completely biased and will stay biased. Whether you're Booger McFarland, okay, or whether you're Joseph Adai. The fact remains, okay, you got some games you got to go out there and win, buddy.
I don't want to push back on this number 18 thing here at the end.
I love Jacob Hester more than anybody, okay? I have blood, sweat, and tears with this man.
But is Hester truly the best? Number 18.
Well, I mean, I guess you can make a Matt Malk question. But yes, it's Hester.
So I mean, honestly, when it comes to just upside and NFL success, wouldn't it be Trey White?
That's Carter the Power Bryant.
I do want to show you this, man. I'm going to the National Card Collection Convention in Chicago this weekend. And
say that 10 times fast.
Dude, it's a sock and sandal Hawaiian t-shirt fest, baby. It's the nerdiest of the sports nerds, baby. Picked up my favorite Dylan Cruz card recently. It was actually given to me not too long ago. Look at that.
Does that say Kaboom?
Kaboom, the Team USA, Dylan Cruz. I thought of you when I got this. Now I got to get a Paul Skeens big card. But
oh,
yeah,
Lord,
man.
we got Bogalusa in the chat.
We got Bogalusa? Let's go. Huh?